Hi there. In our first unit for C1000, we think a lot about who we are as a person. Part of that is thinking about who we are as college students and how adapting to a college English class might ask us to use words or language that are new to us or that might feel uncomfortable. You might also do a reading or two, I promise, that has language that feels unfamiliar, right? We'll read Montaigne and Plato and Aristotle, and sometimes that can feel different and exciting, but maybe a little bit overwhelming too. I really like this academic article from Alvarez, Juan, and Lee. We will read the entire thing, but we're starting with the introduction to help frame it before you read it tonight for homework. And so, as you read, we're going to be looking for specific details that catch our attention, right, and are just really well written. And then we're going to do some journaling in the same way that the authors wrote. So, take a second and pause this video and read through these 4 paragraphs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that you're back, let's go ahead and take a look at this first bit. When you annotate, right, let's look for something a language architect does. And a language architect is a person who builds language, right? Who builds words in combinations together to make meaning of the world. You'll do that a lot in college because so much of the work that we do in English and history and philosophy and really even statistics is through communicating with others. And so when you think about writing for school, you're probably imagining composing formal or academic writing, the essays, right? Where you try to sound like an expert and have an academic tone, right? You might find yourself cleaning up your voice to make yourself sound appropriate. And you might be aware that the people who read your writing might make assumptions about how much you know based on the words you use. We know that can make us really self-conscious. And I think if you haven't already underlined that language architects might use an academic tone or change their voice, right? You might underline those. Also, if you haven't already, circle the places where they seem to be quoting. I'm going to ask you at the end, who do you think they're quoting? What is going on here, right? I love these examples in dashes, and it's such a nice way to use a dash to do a 1, 2, 3 example. How you communicate with your best friend, how you communicate with your coworker, all the different ways that we communicate they use examples of. You might be trying to filter out the variations of your voice and your different ways of communicating. Stop and think for a second. Do you talk differently with your professors and your friends, or does it sound almost identical? I'm pretty sure if you sent me an email, it would look different than a chat you sent to your friend, right? Our authors seem to point out that this can be tricky, right? And maybe even exhausting. It sometimes makes us feel like we don't sound like us, right? If you have these feelings, right, is it worth asking, should we try to protect our voice? What if you used a little bit of your personality in your writing? This might be a good point to make a note on the side. Think about a connection you can make to real life. Has there ever been a time where the voice sounds fake because it's so academic? Are there ever times where we want a real answer from a real person and we want it to sound like a real person, right? The purpose of this article, I think, is to explain to you that you matter and that your voice matters in academic writing, right? Because you have, and please highlight this, a unique vision. I love that, right? The most successful communication is when you bring your voice and the way you speak to a classroom, right? So, in other words, how you speak, act, and negotiate language in uneven power context is how you work as a language architect. So, how you use your words and how you share your ideas in your voice, that's hard work, but that's what language architecture is. It's you bringing your best voice forward to sound like you so people can understand you. That's powerful, right? That's our greatest strength. And we do this to push ideas and boundaries in writing. And when you're pushing a boundary or an idea of writing, that's your working language. That's your language. That's fully you, your heart, your soul, your brain. And it's communicating your worldview to other people. We need that. We very much need that in academic writing. And we'll see lots of examples of that in this unit, right? And we'll see that this isn't just me telling you that your home language and your friendship language and your work language are important. You'll see many researchers also agree that as well, right? And that often when we claim our many languages that we speak, it actually helps everyone have a bigger worldview and a more fair worldview. It makes the world a better place, right? And so we want your richness and your voice in writing. Sometimes your richness in your voice in writing means, hear me out, writing about yourself and an experience that only you have. Take a moment and you might pause the video here. You can type in or write by hand things you do for fun. You can also make a list underneath. This should all expand because it's a Word doc. Things you have to do because you have to. Things that you do that make you who you are. And so you might say brush your teeth, but we would argue that most people should, right? So maybe some things that you do that not everyone does. Play D&D, surf, skateboard. After you do that, I want you to consider who you are. So are you a brother or a sister? Are you the oldest child? Because we know what that means. Or the youngest, right? Do you identify as a middle-aged person or as an adolescent? Are you a co-enrolled high school student? Or are you a military veteran? All of these things are important. After you pause and fill these out, pick one item that feels true, but that you don't usually bring into your school writing. And I want you to write about it here. So one thing about me is I'm former military, I'm a veteran, I'm a first generation college student, I'm a Latina, right? Whatever your one thing is. After you pause and do that, I want you to think about what are some assumptions people have made, either good or bad about that, right? That surfers are really cool, but also that maybe you don't think very much because you're just obsessed with the waves, right? Or maybe that military people are just out there to be in the military and follow someone else's lead, but you can think for yourself. Tell me what the truth is on this side. I'll show you my example. I wrote about being a first generation college student. It's down here. And so we're going to use the first paragraph of the reading we just did as a writing mentor. It's going to teach us what to do. And so it said, when you think about writing for school, you're probably imagining. And so I'm going to tell you about being first-gen college student because I am. When you think about being a first-gen college student, you're probably imagining a wide-eyed young person who might have struggled in high school, who might have felt terrified to attend their first class, who might not know the hidden rules of college. And so I use the sentence starter. You see what's coming next? I bet you already do. You might have the experience of, see how I copied it from there? You got it. Professors assuming you know how to navigate the school or the online programs. I see a typo. And peers assuming that you had the same schooling experience, even if you didn't. Not a little or at all. Because you have many educational experiences, leading a Sunday school class. Look, I did the example thing. Working with foster youth and volunteering as a tutor for homeless shelters. You might find you're just the right person to share your ideas in classes. Doing this work, essentially, and then I'm going to explain what the work is. Trying to share the best parts of yourself, because that's what I tried to do as a first-gen college student, can be empowering. And that's true. I did feel good. But if you wrote this and you were writing about skateboarding, you'd say doing this work, essentially trying to challenge yourself to do a new move or skill or trick, can be frustrating. That would also be good for writing. Does that make sense? Okay. And honestly, this new role can open communities, roles, and relationships you never imagined. I'm honestly reading this again for the 100th time, and I don't like that I repeat role. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do drops here, and look, no one's going to get arrested. That's literally, you can change your words. Do you see how these are the sentence starters from the reading? And then I wrote my own, and then there's space for you to try it out. I want you to write about being the oldest child, or a skateboarder, or a military veteran, or the only core student at your very small high school, or whatever you want, right? I am here for it. A Dungeons and Dragons player, that would make my life, right? Using this as your starting point, the final thing you're going to do is in a notebook. You can do this by hand or on a doc just below, write a little journal. So basically start with what you wrote and then tell me a little bit more. Or if you don't like journaling, it's too touchy-feely, write what you wrote and then find an article that is about teen skateboarders or military veterans going back to school or Dungeons and Dragons players, like literally anything your heart desires, and then tell me about that article underneath and how it compares. That's really good for you to prep for your research paper. Or if you don't like either one of those, you can go back to the reading and say if you agree or disagree with it, right? And I want you to use a specific example from your life. So this says how we talk at school can sometimes be exhausting, and academic language can sometimes be exhausting. You can agree or disagree and then use some of this to explain, especially if you're a multilingual student. Whichever journal entry you choose, a page or two, double spaced, you can use this as your starter. And you are absolutely welcome to choose A, B, or C. You get the same amount of credit. I'm going to tell you what I liked and what I didn't like. That's how you get your grade. Please let me know if you have questions. I'm very impressed with you, and I know you're going to do a great job.